Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on Closing the Digital Divide Conference Access, Instruction, and Equity on Engaging Students and Connecting with Students. My name is Rosie O'Brien-Wojtek, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director for the Connecticut Association of Schools. I'll be your moderator for this roundtable session. This session will be recorded and posted on the CAS website so you can view it later and share it with your colleagues as well as your faculty and staff. Please use the chat to let us know if you have any technical issues, as we will be monitoring the chat. Also, if you have any questions, we'll be monitoring the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as well as those questions that I have prepared for our roundtable conversation today. During the summer at one of the Governor Lamont's press conferences, an announcement was made about access and connectivity work that Connecticut was doing based on the governor's Everybody Learns initiative, along with the supports that were being developed through CEN as districts prepared for remote learning. As critical as this work is for closing the digital divide, it caused us to realize that having access and devices is only half the equation. We also must have high quality, effective research-based teaching and learning for all students, no matter what learning environment model schools and districts are using, whether it's in-person, remote, or hybrid. We'll not be able to close the digital divide and the achievement gap or reverse the COVID-19 slump unless we ensure an equitable and high quality education for every student, and we pay attention to all three: access, instruction, and equity. That's the purpose of this virtual conference, along with being able to discuss connecting and engaging students in equitable, high quality learning experiences. This is the reason why I'm so excited to talk with our roundtable panel of experts this morning. So let's begin by introducing them to you. First of all, we have Doug Casey, who is the Executive Director of the Connecticut Commission for Educational Technology. As Executive Director for CET, Doug designs and manages the State Educational Technology Plan to help ensure the successful integration of technology in Connecticut schools, libraries, universities, and towns. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Rosie.
Next, we have Ryan Cocsondy, who is the Director of the Connecticut Education Network, CEN, which is the Internet Service Provider Network built for and dedicated to the community anchor institution within the state. Ryan also represents CEN and its members both regionally and nationally through service on service boards and organizations. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Jonathan Costa is the Assistant Executive Director for Ed Advance and is the author of the Corwin Press book, Digital Learning for All Now. Welcome, Jonathan.
Nice to be here.
Dr. Elizabeth Radday is the Research Specialist for Skills 21 at Ed Advance. She supports the Skills 21 National Science Foundation research projects and works with teachers and students on developing solutions to real-world problems in STEM. Welcome, Liz.
Hey, everyone.
And Abigail Waldron is Curriculum Coordinator at Ed Advance. She's also an adjunct instructor at the University of St. Joseph, teaching educational technology courses in the master's program. Welcome, Abby. So let's get started. As we all know, districts and schools across the state have planned for 3 different scenarios this year. That would be in person, remotely, and a hybrid learning model. To that end, we've been hearing in the news about the state and district efforts to get students online at home. Doug and Ryan, I know you and the people that you work with have been really busy this summer, so I'd like to begin by asking you to share with us some of the details of your work.
Well, I'll hop in. Thanks for that introduction, Rosie, and thanks for pulling this session together. I'm looking forward to listening to my colleagues as much as sharing. Just a quick overview of the Everybody Learns initiative. This was an effort that was spearheaded by Governor Lamont, acknowledging that there is a digital divide in our state. By some estimates, somewhere around 40,000 students statewide didn't have access to the internet, which was a problem before February, March rolled around. But as soon as the shift to remote learning took place, that digital divide was brought into really critical relief. And so using some of the funds that have come through the CARES Act, Governor Lamont appropriated a good chunk of that money to go to connecting students and equipping them with computers. so that they would be able to engage in learning. Remote learning has just become learning, or it certainly was last spring, and there will be a strong technology component from here on in. So this is a great move. In terms of the numbers, to date, 82,000 laptops have been purchased, and many of those will soon be delivered to schools for distributing to students. The Partnership for Connecticut earlier this spring donated 60,000 laptops. This is the state and the Dalio Foundation, and so altogether more than 140,000 computers have been purchased and are either in students' hands or on their way. Part of this program included the purchase of 13,000 mobile or cellular hotspots. I should say nearly 13,000 hotspots, and these would be devices that students can connect to the internet through and be on the go at the same time. So whether they're at home or in a park or any number of places, those hotspots will be able to get them online. And then at this point, we are well underway in the ordering and fulfillment stage of cable broadband. So this would be working with 5 providers across the state to install high-speed cable internet access into people's homes so that students can get online from home as well as when they're in school. So those are some of the highlights, some of the high points and numbers behind the Everybody Learns initiative. I just want to reinforce that that I may be speaking and sharing the numbers, but this is an effort that includes, obviously led by the governor's office, including Ajit Gopalakrishnan from the State Department of Education, Ryan, who you'll hear from in just a moment, from CEN, Bert Cohen, who runs the State Broadband Office in the Office of Consumer Counsel, the Department of Economic and Community Development with Alexandra Dome there, as well as Rob Vitsky, who technology folks in Connecticut will remember from his CEN days. Rob now serves with Internet 2. And so this is definitely a team effort, and we have been really depending on our districts to work as partners with us to make sure that these connections and devices get delivered. So I'll pause there, and sure Ryan's got some insights to share about the Everybody Learns initiative as well.
There's actually a few, and thanks, Doug. There's directly related to Everyone Learns, where CEN is basically been charged with overseeing a rollout of Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the state. And these are targeting the districts where the digital divide is the greatest, whether urban or rural, it doesn't matter. And whether it's due to lack of physical connectivity that may get addressed through what Doug just described, or a socioeconomic issue, it doesn't matter. Either way, those citizens are not being reached. And a third approach where Doug described the cellular and then the wired is to do Wi-Fi hotspots and partner with some of the community anchors that CEN already serves, like libraries and municipal buildings, to have another option for citizens to walk up, drive up, and get on. And that could be for educational use, that could be for literally searching for a job, or even telehealth. And outside of the direct Everyone Learns initiative, CEN, since this has been started, trying to figure out how to best be helpful for schools and our members, is to come up with workshops and work with our folks to better predict what a hybrid learning model may look like, what that may do to the bandwidth that they need at their schools to successfully run those kind of programs at scale. And even before that, completing a previous project to make sure that we have enough capacity way upstream in the back end for really heavy video and distance learning, which is used at a whole new level this academic year. It's been really interesting and really collaborative, and really appreciative of everybody that has helped contribute to better outcomes along those lines.
You're absolutely right. I don't know how we could do what you guys are doing without all the other people behind the scenes as well. So I think it takes a lot of coordination and effort on your part, along with all the help that you're getting from everybody else. Doug, I'm wondering if you can share any additional details about how students are going to be able to get online now that you've got all those devices that are being deployed across the state.
Sure, Rosie. The actual steps and logistics vary a little bit from provider to provider. So if you imagine a map of the state of Connecticut, there are different regions with different cable providers that will be actually engaged in the fulfillment of these requests. But so districts who are listening, district leaders who are listening, or parents, the steps that are going on pretty much in parallel are that we've cast a very wide net with districts, asking them that as of the latest date that they can, to provide estimates of the number of students that still need to be connected. We don't want to over ask and keep asking, because we've already done some surveys in the spring, both through the Commission and the Department of Education. But at this point, what we're doing is what are called serviceability checks. So we're asking districts to partner with us to give us the addresses of the students that are definitely not connected or may not be connected based on the kind of activity that they're seeing through remote and blended learning. We're then taking that information, sharing it with our cable providers, those partners, to make sure that those are actually addresses that are in the service area, as well as make sure we address any issues, like, say, for example, if somebody lives with a very, very long driveway that's far away from a connection point, that we kind of address those issues. So to be clear, this is confidential and anonymous information. We're not sharing any names with any third parties at this point. We're just trying to see who can we connect, and then following that process, we'll actually be providing, depending on the carrier, either a voucher system or simply giving, through the districts, giving contact information for families to reach out and say, I need a connection, and then they'll take it from there. So we're trying to make this as smooth as possible for families, and we are also trying to make it smooth for the districts, because they have their hands full this fall with all the other concerns about opening up school in the new protocols to keep kids and educators safe.
That is so true. They do have their hands full. I'm wondering, with the school shifting to remote and blended learning approaches, what new challenges do districts face within the four walls of Connecticut schools?
Well, I think Ryan is probably best equipped from a technology perspective to talk about that from a networking perspective. I would just say that, I mentioned earlier about 142,000 new devices that are being deployed just through state and partnership efforts. My conservative guess would be that number may be approaching 200,000 new devices, given all the other district investments that have been made as well. So if you think about that sort of sea of new devices that are coming into the four walls of Connecticut schools, there will definitely be networking and security and wireless concerns there. But Ryan, I'm sure you got better insights on that than I do.
Yeah, and I try and break it down about as simple as possible wherever I can, right? So we're adding in, over 100,000 devices, if not two. We're adding in new learning platforms that may have been lightly used or now heavily used. And now we're adding in, heavy video conferencing for remote and hybrid learning. So it's kind of like A plus B plus C equals whole new bandwidth demand on your district connection. So when you add all those things up, it's a whole new shift as to what could or should be there. And we're, without real data in testing it, which we're doing right now, you're trying to make the best, most educated guess you can based on data available, right? So we ran workshops on that. We worked with a couple local leads, and I will give a special shout out to Craig Holland over in Newington, because he and I landed on a very simple equation that actually kind of came up like that early. And then, like most things we do, we just want to get others involved to make sure that our logic is sound and our rationale is good. And it was refined a little more. And then we had something that was presentable that was hopefully, helpful to the community. And even thinking about that as to what might be coming, our approach is to support the districts as much as we can and all of our members, and with just basic uncertainty, and that is, the coined phrase of all COVID. We came up with a program, we called it the Bandwidth Bonus Program, where any district that needs, or any member that needs additional bandwidth because of COVID and general uncertainty, we're only going to charge you for the optic and the config, but whatever you paid last year, you can pay this year, and basically have at it, because we don't want that to be a concern or a bottleneck or somehow impede teaching and learning because of something as little as another port that may make all the difference to a district. It hasn't been flawless, but it has been really helpful, and we've ferreted out some other issues that are more segmentation or technical, but from a raw bandwidth capacity standpoint, we have it, we're happy to share it. And again, get through this hump and we'll figure out if this is the new norm, or we can kind of reset and go back to normal. And again, it's this is a community of networks. Our members are the owners and the stakeholders. We don't report to stockholders, so we're just trying to do what's best for everybody and make sure that the things above the network that are all riding on it are not impeded by something as like network and bandwidth that just isn't available.
That's awesome. I love it. So what other building blocks or initiatives were already in place before COVID hit that districts should know about? I know you guys have been doing a lot of work.
Yeah, I can jump in on that, Rosie. That and sort of as perspective, I think it's important for those who are joining us. So I think we're trying to take this conversation from sort of the basic, as they say, boxes and wires, devices and internet connectivity, which are really important and essential conditions, and then sort of taking it down to the sort of more deeper, I would say, more instructionally meaningful levels of teaching and learning using digital tools. But some of those other sort of tools in our toolkit include guidance on what proficient use of technology looks like among students and educators and educational leaders. So between 2017 and 2019, the Commission adopted and endorsed the ISTE standards. So those may be very familiar to listeners and those who are on this call, or they may be brand new, but they're definitely worth taking a look at. These are the kinds of standards that identify and help to spell out what competency with technology looks like. It's a lot more than just having a computer in your hands. It's how do you look at sort of attributes like collaboration and critical thinking and privacy and digital citizenship and digital literacy. I mean, these are very sort of deep, broad topics and sets of competencies that students and teachers really need to have in their capability set, not just for teaching and learning, but for lifelong success and citizenry. So I would point folks to those resources. They're at ct.gov/ISTE, ISTE. We've also done a lot of work around clearing the way for all that education technology that Ryan referred to earlier. So as folks are aware, there's a data privacy law in Connecticut. And I always feel like the bad cop when I bring up data privacy, but the law is there. It's got a lot of common sense measures to it, really trying to make sure that there is transparency and insight as to the kind of data that's being collected and shared with third parties when teachers and students, or teachers in schools, are deciding to use cloud-based software that captures and shares student data. So on our website, which is ct.gov/edtech, you'll find information about student data privacy, and specifically, we've been partnering with Learn Platform to establish a whole repository of education technology that is compliant and approved from a privacy standpoint for districts to engage in. Now, there are also a lot of other tools within that whole platform, including report cards and scores from other educators as to what works for them in their classrooms. And so that's really valuable when looking at the kinds of education technology tools that teachers may want to leverage for engaging students across a number of different subjects and grade levels and challenges. The other things that I would mention are our launch last year of the whole Go Open, which is open education resources. So Go Open CT is an initiative that really reflects more groundswell effort to leverage free and openly licensed materials within classrooms for students in K-12 as well as higher education to help contain costs and deliver high quality standards aligned materials to students, especially in this era when, let's face it, local taxes are taking a hit because of all the challenges economically that we're facing. So schools and universities, for that matter, are going to have to be really creative about how they continue to deliver high quality standards aligned materials to students, and OER is one great approach to that. And then finally, I would also point to a resource that's been out there for quite some time, our Digital Equity Toolkit, which is looking at a sort of community-based approach to making sure that students have the connectivity and the devices that they need to sort of have those essential conditions for learning. We have deployed all these new computers. We're well underway to getting connectivity for students across the state. But long term, we look at that toolkit as a resource, and we're also actively lobbying national leaders through national groups, even members of Congress, and partnering with our Connecticut delegation to look at long-term changes so that funding follows students to their homes wherever they're learning, as opposed to just to schools through that E-rate program. So there's a lot behind the scenes that we're working on as well, beyond just what's on our website, to help ensure that students stay connected and keep learning online.
And a lot of those will work in the classroom in person as well as out of the classroom remotely, or however we're doing education in the future. I just want to let people know that if you're listening, we will link those resources to this video when we record it and post it. And Doug, you might want to just type some of those addresses into the chat so people have those so that they can check them out, because they are great resources. So I'm going to turn the conversation a little bit. We've been talking a lot about technical issues and access and devices and connectivity, but I'd like to turn to you, Jonathan. And I know there's a lot of other things that go on behind the scene besides the resources that Doug just was talking about in planning and preparation to make all this happen. Beyond all the technical connection issues, what are the primary equity and policy challenges that come to the forefront when we think about virtual and blended learning?
Yeah, I mean, this really puts a spotlight on how important the work that Doug and Ryan and others are doing to get as many kids connected as possible, because unfortunately, the challenges that make normal in-person school harder for some students and others are really multiplied and made even more impactful in an online learning environment. You know, housing, food insecurity, access to quality digital devices, even having an interruption-free place to work or attend class. All these issues can make online and blended learning, more challenging in communities that are historically underserved. And additionally, as a general rule, when you have kids in person in school, there are services that can be provided by the schools, meals, specialized supports from social workers or intervention therapists, that all help close the opportunity gap between children of poverty and those from well-resourced families. But these services are, for obvious reasons, less frequently accessed when schools don't meet in person. So that's why keeping students home has such a profound impact on underserved children. And so then not only do they face barriers of accessing online learning in ways that are commensurate with their wealthier peers, but they're simultaneously not having access to some of those social services that in normal situations help support their health and well-being. So it's really a critical mission that Doug and others that are trying to get everyone connected are really involved in to try to help address those equity issues.
Absolutely. So along with that must also be policies and, different things that have to happen at the district level. How are superintendents and people there making plans, and what are they doing?
Yeah. There's really no playbook for this. Doug and I and Ryan were involved in trying to help districts think about doing digital snow days 2 years ago, and people were clutching their pearls about how disruptive having a day at school online would be. So that showed you sort of the mindset going into this. So everything has changed, and there really are no simple or easy answers, primarily because our mindset when it comes to the construction of policy is usually framed through a pre-21st century lens. So in a policy decision in a traditional analog learning environment, we try to think of ways to do it the same for everyone to ensure quality. So everybody gets the same book, you've got the same desk, you have a similar schedule, you have equal access to facilities and resources. But in a digital environment, this can totally be turned on its head. So if you had a situation that was to get a situation where you have equality among students, you may need to do resource provision unequally. For example, if you have two families, each with 3 students in one house, and in one home, each child has a laptop, a cell phone, and a Chromebook, but in the other, there's only one Chromebook to be shared among 3 kids, maybe those students should have 3 times as long to respond to a request or an assignment. Or maybe the district needs to actually get that home 2 devices when the other home doesn't need them at all. Maybe a district needs to provide a Wi-Fi hotspot for a family who doesn't have access to high-speed internet so they can all be online at the same time. There will be need for flexibility and understanding about how individual home circumstances can impact the student's ability to respond and be successful. Fair does not mean equal in this environment, and we need to understand that, because recognizing that reality will ensure that known inequalities are reduced rather than heightened. Because if we don't do this right, then the potential to broaden the equity gap, which is already substantial in Connecticut, could actually get worse if we don't pay attention to those issues.
I totally get that, and I know that we need to think differently and be able to adapt to any new situation that comes along. We know we have to be flexible, adaptable, and plan for whatever may come our way. So because things are changing day by day, and with that in mind, how do superintendents and principals plan for all these changes and still ensure equity of opportunities as well as fidelity of instruction? What key elements need to be in place?
Well, what we try to help folks is just create a mindset that is focused on the things that matter and nimble enough to change. So when we talk to superintendents and district planning teams, we sort of have these 4 frameworks. So first, act outwardly like everything is normal, stay calm and collected and positive, but to internally never be disappointed if things aren't normal, because they're not going to be. This is just totally unprecedented and unusual time, and things change. So we just have to be ready for the ground to shift and to adjust. And that, secondly, we want to always focus on being honest but optimistic. Yes, there has been a learning slump, I heard you say, some learning loss, but we're all in the same boat, really. So in the end, I think if we can focus on teaching and engaging kids on those things that matter most over the next several months and years, the kids who are in school right now will recover their progress on those things that matter most. There will be stuff that will be left behind, but I think if districts have focused on those highest leverage skills, the things that they do left behind won't have a long-term deleterious academic impact anyway. We always need to remember that Maslow is more important than Bloom. In the end, a student or teacher who is struggling to meet their own personal needs can't really focus on good learning needs. You know, if it's hard to study, if you're hungry or sick or scared. So we'd have to make sure that everyone's personal needs are met before we can help meet their educational needs. And finally, we talk about planning for contingencies with the understanding that everything you plan will need to be changed, and then it will need to change again, and then you'll probably change it a third time. Most of my planning discussions in the past with districts have been on 3 and 5 year horizons. You know, a news cycle can change what happens. So being ready to plan, certainly, but understanding that those plans are going to need to change and always be aware of what's happening in your community so you can adjust is really, really critical.
You're so right. And we see that almost every day in the news. There's something that's driving something else that's going to
Yes.
make us, cause us to change. So absolutely. There's so much to think about going behind the scenes. But right now I want to bring us to the third part of what we were talking about today with the equation. We have access, we've got equity, but I also want to talk about the high quality instruction, because we know that that's really important if we're going to make sure that we can close the achievement gap as well as the digital divide. So I'm going to turn to Abby and Liz, and I'd like to ask you, just get some suggestions from you about what you've been doing to help students in the classrooms, what kinds of things that you've learned from, and characteristics of effective engaging in online learning that you've learned in the last 6 months when you've been working in classrooms and working with teachers.
Thank you. So engaging online learning starts with strong instructional practices, but there are some significant shifts that happen as well. So what we're seeing is that the teacher needs to be more of a facilitator, fostering a student-centered learning environment, and that involves a shift in control to students. So that's over pace, path, time, place. So there's a shift that happens that engages students in a different way. Also, teachers need to become more designers. They've experienced this all along, designing instruction that centers on the learners and really prioritizes engagement. There's a focus on access to learning as well, and we all know that they're trying to design instruction for multiple environments, so that's also a challenge. There's some key factors in creating a successful online and hybrid learning environment. One of them we all know is the SEL piece, and the building relationships and fostering a sense of community with students. This is essential, and it starts on day one and it goes for the entire year. It's also a little bit more challenging in multiple environments, but the understanding is that we're trying to rebuild classroom communities and rebuild that sense of this is a place, it's a safe place to learn and make those connections for students. I also want to add that there's an importance to rebuild professional communities as well in schools, because teachers have gone through all of the same things that students have gone through during this time. And so it's a time to kind of come back together and collaborate and really connect over some great work. The planning is way more involved and intentional. If you've spoken to a teacher lately, you'll know that their parameters of their day have gone beyond the typical day. There's a need to focus on priority skills and content. These need to be high leverage skills that the students are engaged in, and the students need to be engaged in really authentic activities. It really is about reinventing what school looks like. So designing a virtual classroom, designing of the tasks, they need to be created with clarity and purpose for students. Another factor would be providing consistent opportunities for feedback and reflection. How are you uncovering their misunderstandings? How are you engaging in multiple ways to measure understanding and learning, knowing that your learners are in 2 different places? Really taking all your best practices plus a need to consider how you design instruction, thinking about clarity of purpose and flexibility for all learners to succeed.
Especially in this new environment online, where it's a lot more difficult to create those relationships when you're not sitting knee to knee, eye to eye, face to face.
Exactly.
So Liz, what are some of the most popular platforms and effective strategies that you see helping teachers to support this kind of instruction?
Yeah, so I'm going to get right down on the ground and talk about what I'm seeing and just and 6th grade. So I'm seeing this from the teacher point of view, and I have my own 2 children that are in a full remote environment right now. So, and I've been working with a lot of different teachers, and Google has so many different tools that can help teachers make learning more engaging and effective. My number one go-to when I'm doing a PD and working with teachers, and that I'm seeing teachers use a lot, is Pear Deck, P-E-A-R Deck, a free add-on for Google Slides. It turns your Google Slides into interactive presentations. Students can answer polls or multiple choice questions or open-ended questions. This morning, my daughter was even drawing on slides. And then teachers can see those answers and share the answers with other students, both anonymously, and then see what students have done on their own with student names attached to them. Padlet is something that a lot of teachers are using, and I really like. It's a really easy tool where students can insert a picture, write a comment, they can respond to each other. I've seen teachers use this also as a choice board, so they'll open up a Padlet and have lots of different choices of activities. We know that kids need voice and choice right now, so Padlet is a cool place to put some of those choices. And then the last one that I really like is Flipgrid and Seesaw. Both of these platforms are easy for students to use. It's easy for them to create videos and share with their class and teachers. It's an easy way for them to kind of explain their thinking. I know math teachers and high-level science teachers are having a lot of difficulty figuring out how to see the work students are doing. It's not easy to write it in a Google Doc. My husband is a math teacher, and he's been playing around with a lot of different ways to see student work. So some of it is as low tech as taking a picture and sending it back, but Flipgrid and Seesaw are really cool ways for him to say, like, videotape yourself talking through how you solve this problem, and then he can watch the 30 to 30-second video and see what kids are doing. So those are some of my favorite tools.
I just want to say to anyone listening, if you weren't with us in the first session with Doug Fisher, he does give a lot of different examples, as well as ways to actively engage students in the learning when you're working at a distance. I'd like to ask Abby if there's specific barriers or obstacles that teachers and parents should be aware of.
Yeah, there are a lot of barriers. One we've already talked about a little bit is access. So we talked obviously about the students' access to technology. That's a barrier. But also, once they have technology, are we using platforms and file types that all students can access on the devices that they're using? So keeping that in mind. I would also point to the access, providing multiple means of access for learning to address the needs of all students is an important one to reflect upon as well. And also, how do students and families access the help that they need? So I'd say there's lots of levels to the access barrier. Another one is technology skills. This is a challenging one because, again, it's multi-levels. There are multiple levels to this. So what training do educators need in order to be able to integrate technology effectively and purposefully? So it's not just learning how to use a platform or use an app. It's how do you turn that into something that becomes meaningful learning. Again, reflecting on design. So we're asking teachers to be designers. Designing an online learning environment is complex and takes planning. So do teachers and leaders understand how to plan for and what to plan for synchronous versus asynchronous learning? Students' technology skills can also be a barrier. What skills do they need in order to succeed in your course? Also, parents. Obviously, parents have different ability levels using technology, and are there resources for parents that they can access to build their own understandings about the technology that their students are using in schools? One other one I could think of was about expectations. The expectations can also be a barrier. Does everyone understand the expectations, first of all? Do teachers understand what the expectations are for instruction for the day? So does that look similar from school to school for grade bands? Does that look similar whether for students who are in school versus home? Do students understand what to do? How are you getting students ready for things like online discussions? Yesterday, we had a discussion about using choice boards, and someone brought up the idea of modeling expectations for how to approach even a choice activity. And I think that was an excellent example of getting students ready for this work. There are skills that we need to work on with our students so that they can fulfill the expectations that we have for them in these multiple environments. And also having clear expectations for families. Do families really understand what the synchronous look like versus asynchronous, and what is the purpose between in each of those, so that they understand why their child may be online for a while with their teacher and why they might be offline doing another activity. So really communication is key in all of these areas, and being reflective on how clear the communication has been. I'd say clarity and responsiveness to feedback is essential, and to keep people connected and engaged.
A lot to think about there, and I say communication is key too. And you know, I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, the more we do this, I think the easier and the more, you know, educated parents and teachers and everybody's going to be about this whole thing. So yeah, absolutely. Earlier, you guys talked a little bit about relationships and setting a positive climate and culture in a virtual classroom. Do you have any strategies or ideas for how and what teachers and principals, administrators can do in order to build those relationships?
Yeah, I've been watching my own children start to build community this year, and my husband working on it with his students. And a lot of the things that teachers and administrators have always done to build community can be changed into being interactive activities that you can still do online. I know that some of the fun things that my children have done, and I've seen other classrooms do, is they've done online talent shows. They've brought their pets to class. These are things that, you know, in some ways, teachers are getting a deeper view of their students. I know my daughter talks about her cat all the time, and that she could bring our cat to class. Sorry, Jonathan, not our dog. You know, that just like, it helps teachers know their students even better. So they've done talent shows, they've brought pets and siblings, they've played a lot of games, whether it's categories or Pictionary. They've done a ton of scavenger hunts where the teacher will say, everybody has 30 seconds to go and find something green in their house, and they bring it back, and then they can share things like that. Teachers are doing a lot of different things as get to know you activities, whether it's having each student design their own slide, or I know some people are using Bitmoji classrooms. I know some teachers were doing design your locker. So if you because they're not using lockers at school this year, but what would you put in your virtual locker? So some of these get to know you activities that teachers would normally do, they're doing in more creative ways. Using different tools. Padlet is great to put some get to know you slides up there. And as teachers are going through this first month of school, there's got to be time to do some of that get to know you work while they're doing plenty of other academics.
Sounds like fun to me. I'm wondering what kind of strategies that you found effective in actively engaging students. Now, you gave us some that are really fun, but are there some other ones that can really promote that high quality learning experience that's going to provide rigor and really get them critically thinking and engaged?
Sure. So instructional design that offers choice is key to actively engaging students. I would say designing choice boards or playlists allows students to have some choice over path, place, time, and place. It's a way to plan for multiple learning environments as well. I'm going to pass this off to Liz because she's going to share some great information about the project that her team has been working on.
Yeah, so last spring, last March, as we were slowly watching schools, you know, across the country do different things, our big work at Skills 21 has always been our huge Expo Fest. So students from 30 to 40 different districts across the state come to this high energy Expo Fest at the Wallingford Theater, and they show off their amazing team-based projects and inventions and solutions, and we were watching it like disappear before our eyes, going, okay, so, you know, maybe they're not going to be able to finish these projects. They're going to end up abandoning these things, but we believe so strongly in challenge-based learning, and we were kind of like, well, what do we do? And we were also watching all these adults online start talking about how there was a yeast shortage because everyone wanted to learn how to bake bread, and people wanted to learn new skills and had all these goals for this quarantine time. And we're stocking up on everything from yarn to yeast to, you know, wood. They were making things. So we were like, okay, how can of this opportunity where these kids really do now have all of this time where they are pretty isolated. And we ended up pretty quickly writing a project curriculum called the Personal Interest Project, and we call it a PIP. And these are individual projects that students design based on their interests, and then they execute these projects. So we designed a curriculum that has 3 units. There are 4 activities in each unit, and so the first unit is discover, then the middle is create, and then they share their projects. And so with teacher support in the beginning, and it's a very gradual release, students are creating, we challenge them really to learn, solve, make, or do. So think of that thing that you've always wanted to do, or that problem you've always wanted to solve, or that thing you've always wanted to make, and really make a time management plan and do it. And within that work, we built this curriculum around some other fundamental things like collaboration. So even though students weren't working together arm in arm and side by side, we did ask them to share their projects with their peers. We asked them to get feedback from their parents. We asked them to create an online profile through our Launchpad web platform. So we had over 300 students in Connecticut do PIPs last year, and the curriculum right now is appropriate for about 5th through 12th grade. And we were so impressed with the work these students did. Some examples, we had kids learning how to code, how to make their own video games, how to make apps, how to ride a skateboard, how to improve their running time. We had kids that made care kits for students or for other children in foster care. Lots of kids made videos about topics that were important to them and were educational for others. We had some young people building cabinets, building decks, building garden boxes for vegetable gardens, landscaping their lawns. We had a young student, their family was getting ready to sell their house, and their PIP was helping the family like clear out the house and get it ready to sell. So the possibilities were really endless, and students really took on such a wide variety of topics and activities. And then we did invite these students to compete with their PIPs at our virtual Expo Fest, and ended up breaking the projects into different categories, and we gave out a lot of awards. And kids were really excited about this project. And at the end of the year, we did some follow-up surveys, both virtual focus groups and just some SurveyMonkey surveys. And we had such an overwhelmingly positive response to this PIP. And we heard a lot of, this was really different from my other classes because I had choice in my topic. There wasn't one deadline. I could do something I really liked. I got to work with, I got to share my work with other people. Lots of students were so proud of what they had done at the end that you don't have the same pride in turning in a Google Doc as you do when you can like show off your cabinet that you made, or, a Google Sheet's really exciting, but riding a skateboard is a whole lot more exciting. So they were just really happy and really excited. Teachers were so impressed with what kids were able to do. We talked to one teacher who works in an alternative school environment, and he said this was the only work he could get some of the students to do because it was actually engaging, and the students were doing something that was so different but so valuable. And there were so many skills that kids were building through this, from collaboration and teamwork, public speaking. They had to make a video at the end to share what they had learned and had done. They had to make videos for a little trailer for their project, so they were using digital media in different ways, and just a lot of real life skills. So the PIP project has been great, and you can find more information on the Skills 21 website and at skills21.org/PIP, and I will put that in a chat.
Or I'm sure you can contact Liz at Advance, and you can point them in the right direction as well, because it sounds like great. Project-based learning is great. I have another question about our most vulnerable students and those students with special needs, because that's a big concern for teachers and administrators. And I'm talking about English language learners, special education students. What strategies and effective teaching have you seen to deal with those special populations?
So I would say, again, it starts with building those relationships with learners throughout the whole year, over time, and spending time to discover their strengths. Oftentimes, these are learners that can feel marginalized and become disengaged. And this becomes even a bigger challenge when you may have them at home, or some of them are at home and some of them are at school. So this is really an opportunity to reimagine what your class can look like for all the students in your class. I think by utilizing universal design for learning principles, you want to design your instruction proactively, keeping in mind the wide range of learners that you have in your class. I would share support tools and resources with all students: graphic organizers, translated text, sentence starters, checklists, anything that you would use for students that need support, I would have available to all students in your platform. It also engages students who you may not be aware are struggling, and it really shows the students that they are part of the whole class as well. And these are really good, solid tools to use. Making sure that you include multiple ways to present information, multiple ways for students to show what they know, and multiple ways for the students to have access to engaging in your class. So again, things like choice boards and playlists can be designed to meet all students' needs. I'd also be aware of the technology, the assistive technology that you have available to you that are built into platforms like voice typing or dictate, and plan for synchronous check-ins as well with all of your students to model, reteach, and assess their learning. I think that a big piece that's really important for students that gives them a voice and making sure all their voices are heard is to ask all of your students for feedback on a regular basis. So what some teachers do is they have daily check-ins. It's everything from how do you feel to what was hard today, what's something that you struggled with in our class. So then you get that feedback on a regular basis, and you can be responsive to the needs of all the students in your class. Liz mentioned so many great tools that really give students an opportunity to shine in different ways. And I think ultimately we just want all of our students to feel empowered and motivated. You need to plan for variability in all of your learners and be responsive to their needs. By accessing these tools and these resources for support, I think that you're on the right track. And I just wanted to also add that collaborate with your colleagues. So these are things that you can build your own toolbox by really working together to make sure that all of your learners are getting what they need in their classes.
I love that. Collaborate with your colleagues because it's so important. We can't do it all by ourselves, and we can learn so much from each other and help each other. I could listen to you guys all day. Like, I am just so in awe with everything that you've said this morning, but I'm going to ask our final question, which is to have you share one success story with us about something that's happened either with the work that you've done or something that you've seen that's happened across the state, and one hope for a successful school year for educators across the state. And Doug, I'm going to start with you.
Well, maybe maybe I'll start off with a just broad-based, high level. I never would have asked for COVID to come upon the state of Connecticut or the world, but I think in some ways it's drawn into relief where the needs are, sort of rip the Band-Aid off. And so the sort of optimism or positive takeaway is I'm really happy that this discussion about equity and access has gone way beyond just the usual suspects of us in the educational community. Specifically one area of hope. A quick story is a elementary school teacher that was one of my son's favorites. We were talking with our neighbors. Our kids are long graduated now, but we're talking with our neighbors about this teacher who is wonderful, but probably wasn't the person we thought would be the champion for digital learning best practices. And our neighbors whose son has this teacher was saying she is going to town, she's embracing it, she's acknowledging the hardship that it brings in adapting to these new conditions, but she's all in and she's sort of leading the charge. And I think it's great to hear stories like that. It's not to sort of underscore the challenges that are there, but I think there are so many great educators and leaders across the state who are doing a phenomenal job in pivoting. And I just commend our colleagues from Ed Advance to just all the work that they're doing and have been doing for years to support teachers. It's amazing. So thank you guys. It's inspiring.
Very, very. Okay, Ryan.
I thought about this off and on because we try and get the most collaborative approach we can to most solutions, right? Because nobody has all the single answers. And early in COVID and even over the summer and getting ready for the academic year, it was really just trying to figure out what's coming. Where are you in your journey for planning for hybrid, online, whatever your district may be doing, and how can we be helpful, right? And whether it's just scheduling a few discussions or facilitating other ones, or just being participants in other ones. We're really just trying to help get better solutions out there and help districts with whatever their needs may be. And obviously our lane is internet and bandwidth and providing it. And yeah, we do charge for it, but we don't see us as a provider subscriber model. It's a partnership to figure out what's the right thing to do. How can we make it low or no cost? And we would always go for no cost wherever possible. And we get really good feedback from our members and our community folks saying, hey, can we do this? Or hey, can we do that? So it's not a specific one story, but it's really truly a collaborative effort for, all things new and all things COVID and everything that it's kind of uncovering the way, Doug described it as ripping the Band-Aid off of, whether you like it or not, it's here, and we're all in this together and trying to make things happen and get to a better place.
We all want to swim instead of sink, right?
Exactly.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm going to take up the same banner. I think in the world that we live in right now, it's really easy to focus on what's not working, what's not happening. And it is remarkable how much has been accomplished in 6 months when you think about where we were and how hard people have worked to make it happen. And given all that work, there are still 50 people on this webinar trying to learn something new so they can keep working harder even more. I don't think I've ever been more proud to be an educator in Connecticut than I have in the last 6 months. And I just think we need to not be too hard on ourselves and ask each other, what can we do to help, and just keep trying to do our best and be happy about the effort that we've made, because we really have come a long way in 6 months.
Absolutely right. Liz.
Oh, Pip. It was so amazing. I mean, I can tell you stories of 300 kids, but one of my favorite projects was a young woman who decided she wanted to learn how to skateboard. That was her project. Her stepfather helped her build the skateboard and sand it and put on all the stuff and decorate it. And she went from having zero skateboard skills to like flying down the road on her skateboard. And just like, how cool to take something that you didn't know how to do and use that time to do something new. We had a middle schooler who wanted to learn how to cook the perfect steak. Like, what a fun project that is. And what learning is going on when you realize like, oh, that flame was too high, burnt my steak, but the middle's raw. And, just such cool stuff. And I just hope that Pip, and I know that Pip will outlast COVID and keeping students moving forward on that.
What a gift to have all that time and also all those memories. It sounds like a great project. I want to learn more about it. Abby.
I just want to add that a big success that I've seen kind of universally is the work that the teachers have done to inspire their students through all this and keep their hope alive and do things like book clubs and sing-alongs and read-alouds and just the check-ins. It's so inspiring to really all of us, the work that they've done and those connections they've continued to make in one of the most impossible situations that we could imagine. And my hope is that teachers continue to, and educators continue to connect throughout the state and really share their best practices and really get to know each other and rebuild a whole statewide professional learning community.
Thank you. Doug, I'm a lot like you in thinking that, like, I remember way back when, and I shouldn't say this because it will date me, the Apple IIe came out, and I took it to my elementary school and showed them because I was so excited. And the teacher said, "This too shall pass." And I thought we would never, if I could go back to those days and think about where we are now, I would never have thought that we have come so far. But my hope, I think, is that we never have another snow day in the state of Connecticut, that it never counts against us if we have to stay home on a snow day, that kids can still keep learning and we just keep going and we get out early in June. So that's my hope for everybody. And I have to say, after listening to all of you, and the people that you work with and everything that you've accomplished and everything that you do to help close the digital divide and ensure equitable and effective high quality teaching and learning for all students is a huge success story. So I want to say thank you to all of you for all the work that you do, and keep up that great work because it's awesome. And I can't wait to continue to watch this year to see just how much farther we grow in the use of technology and how much better we get at instruction and being able to provide equity for all. So thank you again for so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us this morning during our Connecting and Engaging Students Roundtable conversation. And thank you for all the work that you've done and will continue to do across the state. If our goal is to truly close the digital divide and achievement gap and reverse the COVID-19 slump, we must provide equitable opportunities that connect and engage all students in high quality educational experiences. To that end, we have to pay attention to all three critical elements: access, instruction, and equity. So thank you so much for being a part of this very important conversation today.